The world isn't ending, but the world we know is changing fast. Every day, the pace of transformation accelerates, reshaping the foundations of global power and commerce. The US tried to reassert economic dominance with aggressive tariffs on BRICS nations, aiming to protect American industries and pressure rivals. These measures were intended as a show of strength, a signal that America would not back down in the face of rising competition. But instead of dividing its competitors, the tariffs have unified them. Formerly disparate interests have found common cause in opposition. What was once a loose association is now a determined economic coalition, forging new agreements and strategies to counter American influence. The tariffs, meant to weaken BRICS, have instead given them a reason to become stronger and more organized. They are investing in shared infrastructure, technology, and trade routes. Retaliatory tariffs from BRICS have hit key American sectors, from agriculture to technology, slowing US growth. Farmers, manufacturers, and tech workers are all feeling the strain. The US economy, once the engine of global growth, is now feeling the blowback from its own policies. Markets are jittery and uncertainty is spreading. The story is no longer just about American pressure on others, it's about mounting pressure on the US itself. The consequences are personal, affecting businesses and families nationwide. Economic statecraft, when wielded as a blunt instrument, often backfires. The intended targets adapt, and the initiator faces unintended consequences. The era of unchallenged American supremacy is over. The rise of BRICS is a structural shift, not a temporary anomaly. This is a turning point in the balance of global power. Attempts to reverse this trend through punitive measures are proving futile and counterproductive. The more the US pushes, the more resilient its rivals become. The global order is shifting, and actions now have equal and opposite reactions. Every move on the chessboard is met with a calculated response. This is the new reality, a post-American world where power is diffuse, alliances are fluid, and influence is shared among many. The consequences are only beginning to unfold. The next chapter in global economics is being written right now, and its outcome remains uncertain. Today's tariff tensions are the result of decades of shifting global dynamics, shaped by both cooperation and competition among the world's largest economies. The roots of this rivalry stretch back further than many realize, evolving through cycles of alliance and confrontation. After the Cold War, the US enjoyed unrivaled power, setting the tone for global trade and finance. But the rise of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and later South Africa, changed the equation, introducing new players eager to assert their own interests on the world stage. The BRIC acronym started as an investment term, coined by economists to describe promising emerging markets, not as a geopolitical threat. Yet, as these nations grew, their ambitions expanded beyond economics. Over time, China became a formidable technological competitor, Russia re-emerged as a global energy power, and India and Brazil steadily increased their influence in technology, agriculture, and services. Each nation brought unique strengths to the table, challenging the established order. The 2008 financial crisis exposed deep vulnerabilities in Western economies, shaking confidence in the old system and accelerating the rise of BRICS. This crisis marked a turning point, as emerging markets gained momentum and credibility. BRICS began to demand a greater voice in global institutions like the IMF and World Bank, unsettling Washington and its allies, who were used to setting the rules. The US gradually shifted from seeing BRICS as potential partners to viewing them as strategic rivals, wary of their growing influence and alternative visions for the global order. The America First doctrine marked a decisive turn toward unilateral action and away from decades of free trade policies, signaling a willingness to challenge old alliances and rewrite the rules. This shift set the stage for today's tariff wars, as countries impose new barriers and retaliatory measures, each seeking to protect their own interests. The conflict isn't just about trade imbalances or deficits, it's about who gets to set the rules of the global order and whose values and priorities will shape the future. The US wants to preserve its leadership and the system it built, while BRICS nations push for a more multipolar world where power is shared and new voices are heard. Tariffs are just a symptom of a much deeper contest for influence, resources, and the right to shape the rules of international engagement. As a result, the rivalry is now entering a more confrontational phase, with both sides preparing for a prolonged struggle that will define the next era of global economics and politics. By September 2025, the US has imposed sweeping tariffs on BRICS, from steel to electronics. The official reason: national security and correcting unfair trade. But BRICS have responded with coordinated retaliation, creating a tangled web of global trade restrictions. India and Brazil, once balancing between blocs, are now aligning more closely with BRICS. India's tariffs hit US agriculture. Brazil deepens trade with China. The BRICS are acting in concert, challenging US tariffs at the WTO and accelerating intra-bloc trade. The US now faces a united front, not isolated rivals. The global economy is fragmenting. Supply chains reroute, investments shift, and companies navigate a fractured landscape. The dream of seamless globalization is fading. This standoff is more than a trade dispute, it's a stress test for the global economic system. The foundations are showing cracks. The US is learning that economic pressure can create the very alliances it hoped to prevent. The world is moving toward competing trade blocs. The tariff war's impact is now hitting home in the US. Some industries see short-term gains, but the broader economy is stumbling. Retaliatory tariffs have hurt American farmers and manufacturers, especially in rural areas. Falling exports mean lower incomes and rising debt in the heartland. Manufacturing faces higher costs, squeezing profits. Inflation is rising, hitting lower and middle-income families hardest. Economic uncertainty is dampening consumer confidence and business investment. Instead of unity, the policy has deepened divisions across regions and industries. The global standing of the US dollar is eroding as BRICS diversify away from it. De-dollarization weakens a key pillar of American power. US GDP growth has slowed to its lowest in years, and the trade deficit remains stubbornly high. The economic tremors are no longer distant, they're real and immediate. The policy meant to project strength is exposing vulnerabilities. America is learning the costs of economic isolation in an interconnected world. Trade experts and analysts are sounding the alarm, warning that the global economic landscape is shifting in ways that few anticipated just a decade ago. Dr. Ananya Sharma of the Peterson Institute says the US miscalculated, assuming it could act without consequence, and underestimated the resolve of other major economies to push back. In a multipolar world, actions provoke reactions, and BRICS have used their market power to fight back, leveraging their collective influence to challenge US dominance in trade negotiations. History warns of imperial overstretch. When ambitions outpace resources, decline follows. Empires that ignore these lessons often face consequences that ripple for generations. The US can't reshape global trade unilaterally anymore. The era of acting alone is over, replaced by a complex web of interdependence. Retaliation from a unified BRICS bloc is draining American resources and influence, forcing the US to reconsider its strategies and alliances. Diplomatically, Washington is losing partners as India and Brazil drift closer to Beijing and Moscow, redrawing the map of global alliances. The focus on short-term trade deficits has blinded policymakers to long-term geopolitical risks, leaving the US vulnerable to strategic setbacks. Weaponizing trade undermines the rules-based order the US once led, eroding the very foundations of global cooperation and trust. As trust in institutions like the WTO erodes, rival blocs form and instability grows, making it harder to resolve disputes peacefully. Experts warn we're trading a predictable system for a chaotic free-for-all, where uncertainty and volatility become the new normal. No one wins in that scenario, least of all the US, whose workers and industries bear the brunt of global instability and lost opportunities. The world is watching, and the costs of miscalculation are mounting, with every misstep scrutinized by allies and rivals alike. The lesson: economic power is no longer absolute. Influence must be earned and maintained through cooperation, not just dominance. The US must adapt or risk further decline, facing a future where flexibility and partnership are more valuable than ever before. BRICS have moved beyond tariffs, launching a coordinated push for economic independence. De-dollarization is at the heart of their strategy, using national currencies for trade, especially in energy. The new development bank is lending in local currencies, deepening financial independence. A joint payment system is in the works, challenging the dominance of SWIFT. BRICS are also diversifying trade partners, building new corridors in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. China's Belt and Road and India's new trade deals are reducing reliance on the US market. Brazil is finding new buyers for its exports across the developing world. This is not just defense, It's a proactive effort to build a parallel economic system. BRICS are leveraging their collective weight to create a multipolar landscape. US tariffs have accelerated their long-term project. The world's economic architecture is being rewritten. The US tariff policy's most lasting impact is the political unification of BRICS. Once divided by ideology and competition, the bloc now stands united by shared resistance. External pressure has forged internal cohesion. Recent summits feature strong declarations of solidarity, not just diplomatic pleasantries. The members have found a common identity in collective resistance. Bilateral disputes are set aside for a united front on the global stage. BRICS are coordinating policy in forums like the UN and G20, demanding more say for developing nations. They're collaborating on technology standards, building alternatives to Western frameworks. The bloc is evolving into a genuine platform for non-Western powers. By treating BRICS as a hostile bloc, the US has helped make it one. The unintended unification is a strategic miscalculation. The shift in global power is accelerating. The global power structure is being fundamentally reshaped. The tariff war has accelerated the shift from US dominance to a multipolar world. American power has limits and other nations are charting independent courses. The post-American world is now a reality. Less stable, less predictable. Competing blocs mean more friction and fewer shared rules. Economic disputes can more easily spill into political or military conflict. Yet this new order may simply be more pluralistic, with regional powers shaping global norms. New institutions will coexist with old ones, creating a complex system of governance. The US must adjust, moving from dominance to partnership, relying on diplomacy. Overplaying its hand has prompted global balancing against US power. The world is moving beyond the American century. The path forward demands a clear-eyed view of reality. The US must abandon the illusion of unchallenged supremacy and embrace coalition building. Smart diplomacy and trust building are essential. Competing on innovation and values, not tariffs, will define future success. Rising powers must also act responsibly, building a more inclusive order. The risk is a fractured world of hostile blocs, leaving everyone poorer and less secure. The choices made now will shape the century ahead. The tariff war has been a costly lesson in the limits of power. The question: has the world learned from it?